What if Ferrari had discovered something illegal in Hamilton's car just before the Mexican GP? Would we be talking about a historic sanction? Or simply a media play to alter the psychological balance of his rivals? Stick around, because what really happened is even more revealing than any conspiracy theory. Ferrari arrives at the 2025 Mexican Grand Prix not only carrying the weight of a victory drought, but also with historic pressure that tests the emotional and technical resistance of the entire organization. 19 consecutive races have passed without reaching the top of the podium. The fact is not minor. If it does not win at the Autódromo Hermanos Rodriguez, the Maranello team will complete exactly an entire year without victories. A complete cycle of frustrations, strategic errors, and insufficient technical development. His last joy came precisely on this same track, on October 27, 2024, when Carlos Sainz, still as a Ferrari driver, dominated the race with an impeccable performance, giving the team a victory that seemed to mark the rebirth of the prancing horse. But that spark never turned into a flame. Since then, everything has been uphill. The 2025 season has been particularly cruel to Ferrari. Not because of a lack of absolute speed on certain circuits, but because of an alarming operational inconsistency. Every time the car seemed to have rhythm, some factor disrupted it. Errors in the pits, poorly calibrated tactical decisions, problems with tire degradation, or simple errors in execution at key moments. The SF25, an evolution of the previous year's car, has proven to be sensitive to track conditions and extremely dependent on a narrow performance window, which has made it difficult to achieve full weekends. Despite having a luxury lineup with Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, the car has not lived up to expectations in most of the Grand Prix this campaign. Austin was an unexpected turning point. After a catastrophic Friday in which the car was unresponsive and race pace simulations were discouraging, Ferrari achieved an almost surgical transformation in its setup. That weekend, Leclerc managed to get on the podium, and Hamilton finished fourth. Not only was it one of the best results of the year, but it demonstrated something that was beginning to be questioned in Maranello: the team's ability to react with intelligence and speed in adverse situations. Data reading, real-time decision-making, and on-track execution were at the level of a top-level team, which generated a wave of controlled optimism ahead of the next event, Mexico. But that short-lived recovery came accompanied by a new challenge. A disturbing rumor began to circulate in the paddock, that Ferrari, after analyzing certain telemetries and comparative parameters, had requested a technical review of Lewis Hamilton's car. More specifically, it was suggested that during the simulations prior to the Mexican GP, the British driver's SF25 presented certain atypical aerodynamic behaviors, especially in medium-speed corners and prolonged braking zones. These types of rumors are common in F1, especially when teams seek explanations for performance differences within their own ranks. And at Ferrari, the comparison between Leclerc and Hamilton has been a constant point of attention since the start of the season. The possibility that there was a shocking discovery was amplified by the media narrative, especially on social networks, where any anomaly becomes a conspiracy. The reality, however, seems to be far from any infraction or technical scandal. There is no evidence, official statements, or technical reports from the FIA that support the idea of an illegal discovery in Hamilton's car. What does exist, and in abundance, is tension. Tension due to the results, due to expectations, due to the pressure of a global fan base that demands Ferrari to once again be the protagonist. And that tension turns any deep technical analysis into the center of attention of a paddock always hungry for drama. This is the true context in which Ferrari finds itself when it arrives in Mexico. A team desperate to win again, with two top-level drivers, an impatient fan base, and a media narrative that can turn against it at any moment. The Mexican GP is not just another race. It is a litmus test to measure whether the Scuderia still has what it takes to compete with McLaren, Red Bull, and Mercedes on equal terms. And above all, to demonstrate that his obsession with every detail is not a sign of paranoia, but of genuine ambition. The same one that took them to the top so many times before. The alleged inspection carried out by Ferrari on Lewis Hamilton's car in the days before the 2025 Mexican Grand Prix was not the product of chance or a desperate attempt to create controversy. It was part of a meticulous strategy that reveals the extent to which the Scuderia is willing to explore every technical centimeter, every possible difference, every minute detail that could represent an advantage or a threat. In a season where the competition between McLaren, Mercedes, Red Bull, and Ferrari is millimeter, the teams no longer only compete on the track. They also compete in data, in analysis, in the interpretation of regulations, and in psychological warfare. Ferrari did not suspect a technical infringement on the part of its own driver, but rather sought to understand why two cars with theoretically identical specifications were offering such different responses under similar conditions. Cross-analysis included braking telemetry, acceleration maps, differential calibration, and especially how Hamilton's SF25 was utilizing airflows around the flat bottom in the diffuser area. In the current era of Formula One, where active aerodynamic solutions are prohibited, any fluctuations in this section are scrutinized. The internal review also coincided with a series of updates that Ferrari had introduced to Leclerc's car, specifically to the side deflectors and front suspension, seeking to generate more predictable behavior under aggressive braking. The problem is that these changes had not been equally effective for both pilots. While Leclerc reported a lack of confidence entering corners, Hamilton seemed to have found a comfort zone in the setup, even using parts from the same batch. That disparity pushed engineers to even study Hamilton's driving style as another technical variable. Factors such as the way it manages the balance of the car in curves, its sensitivity with the accelerator in curve exit mode, and the way it attacks curbs were reviewed. The most interesting thing about this episode is that Ferrari decided not to apply immediate changes to Leclerc's car. Instead, they focused on collecting comparative data during early practice at the Mexican GP, knowing that the Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez layout, with its extreme altitude and low air density, would represent a perfect laboratory to test each theory. Altitude directly affects cooling, turbo pressure, hybrid system performance, and aerodynamic efficiency. If there was any structural or configuration difference between the two SF25s, this circuit was going to expose it clearly. Meanwhile, the technical team remained in constant communication with the FIA to ensure that all modifications and configurations were within regulatory limits. This not only shielded the team from any possible external complaint, but also guaranteed absolute transparency, especially considering that one of the cars involved is driven by Lewis Hamilton, a figure who attracts massive media attention and constant technical scrutiny. But for Ferrari, this race wasn't just another opportunity to score points. It was a chance to show that his obsession with details is not a sign of weakness or paranoia, but an expression of his ambition. In modern Formula One, where the differences between victory and irrelevance are measured in thousandths of a second, technical knowledge is as important as speed. And Ferrari, by analyzing Hamilton's car with that almost surgical thoroughness, made it clear that it is willing to do whatever it takes to return to the top. In a sport where transparency, innovation, and the interpretation of the rule coexist in a blurred line, this technical review reveals an essential aspect of contemporary F1. The true competition is not only run on the circuits, but also in the laboratories, on the computers, and in the minds of the engineers who, like chess masters, move each piece with the precision of someone who knows that the slightest mistake can cost an entire season. The case of the alleged discovery of Ferrari in Lewis Hamilton's car, beyond its veracity, has put on the table a reality that defines the very essence of current Formula One. The competition has gone beyond the physical plane of the track to move to much more complex levels, where engineering, psychology, and strategy are inseparably intertwined. In this context, even a simple internal technical inspection becomes a narrative that arouses global attention, speculation, and, above all, interpretation. The inspection of Hamilton's car, in real terms, was a manifestation of Ferrari's new approach under the direction of Frédéric Vasseur. An obsessive focus on precision, on the search for technical answers to uncomfortable questions, on the desire to understand why performance is not aligned with the talent they have in their lineup. What could be interpreted as an act of paranoia or distrust is actually a clear demonstration of the level of self-criticism and ambition that exists within Maranello today. In a team that has been a victim of its own arrogance in the past, this new methodical profile represents a necessary evolution. On Hamilton's side, this episode reaffirms his impact beyond the results. His mere presence alters internal dynamics, pushes his engineers to go further, forces his colleagues to re-examine their own metrics, and generates reactions from his rivals. And this is where it all makes sense. In a sport where hundredths of a second separate glory from frustration, any sign of advantage, any detail that escapes control, is investigated with almost clinical rigor. Ferrari inspected Hamilton not to find a trap, but to understand how he extracts tenths where others cannot. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.